Elena Davenport's heart fluttered like a captive butterfly as she stepped through the towering walnut doors of Lakeview Mansion. Guests gasped in admiration as Elena emerged, a vision of serene confidence. She lifted her chin, meeting Oliver Grant's gaze at the end of the aisle. His tailor tuxedo fit him like a second skin, and his dark eyes, rimmed with excitement, reflected the depth of the promise he offered. For Elena, that look was everything, proof that this was the man she would trust with her life, her heart, and the destiny of her family's legacy. That same morning, in her father's oak-paneled study, Elena had signed the final inheritance documents. As the family solicitor laid out the parchment scroll, she traced her name in graceful loops, transferring every acre of rolling farmland, every high-rise holding, every share of Davenport Enterprises into her stewardship. Her parents stood by, their faces a mixture of pride and bittersweet nostalgia. Her mother dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a lace handkerchief, and her father's firm handshake ended with a gentle squeeze. In that moment, Elena felt invincible, an heiress poised to balance love and power in equal measure. Now, with the ceremony unfolding under towering marble columns set amid flowering wisteria, she sealed her vow to Oliver. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, a hush settled over the crowd. Then, in a single, joyous exhalation, the assembled guests erupted in applause. Silver trumpets heralded the couple's recessional, and a cascade of rose petals showered them in soft hues of blush and cream. In the opulent courtyard beyond, champagne flutes clinked like distant bells. Waiters wove through the clusters of tuxedos and gowns, offering sparkling libations that caught the afternoon sun like liquid gold. Elena and Oliver drifted from group to group, sharing embraces with dignitaries, toasts with childhood friends, and promises whispered beneath the arbor draped in jasmine. Laughter fluttered around them, bright, celebratory, and full of hope. Yet behind every smile and congratulatory nod, Elena sensed the weight of expectation. As the only child and sole heir of the Davenport lineage, she carried the unspoken hopes of generations. But in Oliver's arms, she found shelter. He guided her to a marble bench overlooking the estate's glistening lake, where swans drifted gracefully. She leaned into him, inhaling the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the sweet perfume of magnolia. For a heartbeat, time stilled, and Elena believed wholeheartedly in their fairy tale beginning. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in rose and amber, Elena lifted her glass to Oliver. "To us," she whispered. He smiled, his eyes alight with promise. In that moment, bathed in golden light, surrounded by love and luxury, Elena embraced her new role, beloved wife, heiress of a dynasty, and keeper of a legacy that now began in earnest. 2 years unfurled like the silkiest of tapestries, each day woven with threads of joy and shimmering promise. Lakeview Mansion, once grand and serene, now pulsed with laughter and life. In the rose-scented corridors and beneath the vaulted ceilings, Elena Davenport discovered a new purpose, motherhood. On a radiant spring morning, when cherry blossoms drifted across the driveway like confetti, Anna Grant entered the world. Her first cry echoed through the sunlit nursery, pale pink drapes, plush cream carpets, and a crystal mobile dangling above a mahogany cradle. Anna's cheeks, like tiny rosebuds, flushed with vitality. Her wide, curious eyes mirrored Elena's deep brown warmth and Oliver's stormy gray intellect. From that instant, Elena knew her life had transformed forever. Nights once filled with whispered secrets over champagne were now punctuated by the soft coos of a nursing baby. Midnight feedings became ritual, each gentle lullaby and lull of rocking chair a tender dance between mother and daughter. Elena reveled in these stolen hours, the quiet hush of the nursery, the faint chirp of crickets outside the bay window. She memorized Anna's sighs and gurgles, her tiny fingers curling around Elena's own in a grip that felt both fragile and fierce. By day, the mansion's gardens became Anna's enchanted playground. Oliver, ever the doting father, arranged weekly poolside barbecues beneath the pergola draped in wisteria. He hired a master grill chef who charred skewers of shrimp and ribeye to perfection while bow-tied waiters balanced trays of sparkling lemonade and iced rose. Anna, perched in her custom suspenders and pastel sundress, clapped with delight as bronze-sculpted fountains danced to classical music. When the weather turned balmy, the Grants embarked on weekend yacht getaways to nearby hidden coves. The vessel, white-hulled, polished teak deck, cut through sapphire waters as Anna, wrapped in a monogrammed blanket, giggled at schools of fish glinting beneath the hull. Elena reclined on sun loungers with a novel in hand, the sea breeze ruffling her hair as Oliver unfurled the yacht's private parasol. Dinner aboard was a gala of its own. Caviar on mother-of-pearl spoons, lobster thermidor under silver cloches, and Anna's delighted squeals when served miniature creme brulees. Back on land, the social calendar brimmed with red carpet charity galas and exclusive art unveilings. Under crystalline chandeliers at the Metropolitan Club, Elena swept through in Dior gowns that skimmed the marble floors, while Oliver, handsome in midnight black tuxedos, escorted his family with effortless elegance. Flashbulbs ignited as they posed. Anna in a tulle gown that swirled around her like spun sugar, clutching a single white rose. Elena's laughter, crystalline and genuine, lighting up society pages. Oliver's proud gaze fixed on his family. Through it all, the Grant Davenport name gleamed like a crown jewel. Social media buzzed with hashtags. Hashtag Anna the Heir, hashtag Grant Galaglam, hashtag Lakeview Luxury, and their stylized family portraits trended on high society blogs. Friends envied their seamless harmony. Elena balancing board meetings for Davenport Enterprises with ballet classes for Anna, Oliver juggling philanthropic fundraisers with weekend ski trips. Yet beneath the polished veneer lay Elena's most treasured truth. The simple joy of watching her daughter learn to dance, of Oliver's hand resting protectively on her small shoulder, of stolen kisses beneath blossoming magnolia trees. For Elena, life had become a symphony of laughter, love, and legacy, an opulent overture that promised nothing but the sweetest of beginnings. The morning sun played in dappled patterns across the cobblestones of Rosewood Preparatory's front drive as Elena Davenport eased the Range Rover to a gentle stop. The air was crisp with the promise of spring, birdsong mingling with the distant hum of traffic, and Anna's laughter bubbled in the back seat. Elena unbuckled her daughter, smoothing the ruffles of Anna's floral dress before scooping her up. "Have fun, my love," she cooed. Anna's bright sneakers slapped against the marble steps as she scampered toward the grand entrance, her ponytail bouncing like a jubilant spring blossom. Elena closed the rear door and turned to drive away, but her breath caught in her throat. Under the broad canopy of the ancient magnolia tree, its petals drifting like pale snowflakes, Oliver Grant stood with a woman Elena did not recognize. Tall and elegant, the stranger wore a pearl-white silk blouse that shimmered in the sunlight and a pencil skirt that spoke of power and meticulous taste. Oliver, in his polished navy suit, leaned closer, his posture intimate, his palm resting lightly on the woman's arm as she spoke, her voice a soft murmur he punctuated with a gentle nod. Elena's reflection flickered in the tinted glass, her own wide eyes framed by high cheekbones, cheeks warmed by a rising panic. She lifted a trembling hand, pressing her fingertips against the cool glass as if to hold herself in place. Her pulse thundered in her temples, and for a second, the world outside slowed to a heartbeat. 1, 2, each one echoing with the unspoken question, "Who is she?" The woman turned, catching Elena's eye. For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. The stranger's perfect lips curved in a private smile, an unspoken acknowledgement of the power she wielded in that moment. Elena forced herself to return a polite nod and smile, every nerve screaming in betrayal. And then, as if on cue, the woman swept away, her heels clicking against the stone, leaving Elena alone with the magnolia's drifting petals and a chasm of doubt in her chest. Elena closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Magnolia blossoms have a fragrance both sweet and suffocating, but today the scent turned bitter. Her mind raced back through the past 2 years. Anna's first smile, Oliver's whispered compliments, the way his eyes lit up when she walked into a room. Were those moments genuine? Or was she nothing more than a sumptuous prize in his vault of conquests? She sank into the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel as though it might slip from her grasp. The engine's hum sounded too loud in the silent car. Carefully, she slipped the key from the ignition and slid out of the vehicle. The morning air, once fresh and reassuring, now felt frigid, laden with suspicion. She crossed the drive in quiet, deliberate steps, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm that matched her heartbeat. Beneath the magnolia, petals blanketed the ground like the aftermath of an elegant storm. Elena stood hidden behind the trunk, arms folded over her chest. She watched Oliver cross to the woman, their conversation picking up where she'd left off. He smiled in that familiar way, warm, reassuring, but to this stranger. His hand brushed her arm again, the casual intimacy now flashing in Elena's mind like a neon sign. Elena's breath came in measured whispers. She would not confront him, at least not yet. There were too many questions demanding answers. Who was this woman? How long had their meetings gone on? And worst of all, had she ever truly known her husband? As the stranger turned once more and finally strolled away toward the school's wrought iron gates, Oliver watched her go, shoulders easing, confidence restored. Elena remained rooted, determination crystallizing in her veins. She would learn every secret he kept. She would understand his schemes. Today's discovery marked the first shadow over their golden life, an omen that all was not as it seemed. Gathering her composure, Elena returned to her car, head held high. She'd let him believe she was the naive wife. But in the silence of that magnolia-draped drive, Elena vowed to outwit the darkness at the gate before it swallowed her world whole. Elena lay motionless on the billowing sea-green coverlet of their sunlit bedroom, carefully arranging her breathing to mimic slumber. The pale afternoon light filtered through linen drapes, painting soft gold patterns on the cream-painted walls. Beneath her closed eyelids, she felt the gentle thrum of life in Lakeview Mansion, children playing in distant rooms, the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen, and, most unsettling of all, the low murmur of voices drifting in from the courtyard through a nearly cracked door. She forced herself to inhale and exhale in even, soothing rhythms. But each heartbeat felt like a thunderclap against her ribs. Through that narrow gap, she heard Oliver's warm baritone, an intimate timbre she had once treasured. Now it tasted like poison. "I'm so close," he said, voice smooth as polished mahogany. "In a few months, I'll sign her papers, divorce this useless wife, and marry you, Vivian. You know I don't love her. It's for her company's shares I married her." A soft, lilting laugh followed, a sound drenched in triumph. Vivian Blackwell's voice slithered through the threshold with practiced grace. Elena pictured her, poised posture, artful laughter, and those piercing green eyes that had once caught Oliver's admiration. "When she hands over Davenport Enterprises," Vivian whispered, breathless with victory, "you're all mine." That was the moment Elena's world splintered. The plush silk sheets beneath her felt slick against her skin, as though they conspired to smother her. She clenched her fists, nails digging crescent moons into her palms, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. Her chest tightened as if bound in iron, each pulse a reminder of how deeply she'd been betrayed. Yet amid the shock, a cold clarity crystallized. This was not the first straw to break her spirit. It was the moment when her heart hardened into diamond. She recalled the morning she'd signed over her inheritance, the proud tears in her mother's eyes, and the solemn pride in her father's handshake. All of it, every tender memory, every glittering promise, had been a pawn in Oliver's calculated game. She sat up, careful not to creak the bed frame, and pressed her forehead against the cool door. Each breath brought the scent of jasmine and clipped hedges from the courtyard's manicured garden. Overhead, a wrought iron lantern swung gently, sounding like a distant metronome counting down her resolve. In that brief interlude, Elena's mind raced through possibilities. Confront him here and now, storm down in a rage, call her mother to reverse the deed transfers, yet none felt as satisfying as the silent vow forming behind her eyes. If he believed her naive, she would become the architect of a far more devastating betrayal. She would play the useless wife until the moment of his greatest triumph, and then strip him of everything he thought he'd won. The voices below faded. Elena listened as Vivian's heels clicked across the cobblestone, her perfume trailing like a dark promise. Oliver murmured something in reply, profane comfort that made Elena's blood run cold. And then the hush returned, broken only by the chirp of sparrows in the eaves. Elena eased away from the door and sat on the edge of the bed. She placed her daughter's favorite music box, a delicate ballerina poised to spin in endless circles, on the bedside table. The fragile tinkling sound reminded her of Anna's innocence, the one light immune to Oliver's greed. Protecting that light would become her new purpose. Slowly, she rose and crossed to the vanity, where her reflection met her own steely gaze. The woman in the mirror still wore her wedding band, the diamond glinting innocently. Elena's lips curved into a knowing half-smile. She tilted her hand, catching the light, and whispered to herself, "Let him think he's winning." With deliberate calm, she smoothed her hair, applied a light blush, and selected a simple cashmere sweater and tailored slacks. Today, she would walk among them in perfect composure, tender mother, devoted wife, while all the while weaving her silent strategy beneath the manicured facade of Lakeview's gardens. And when the time came, Oliver Grant would discover that the most dangerous revenge is born of patient betrayal. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the mansion's silhouette darkened against a bruised purple sky, Elena Davenport slipped into her private study. The room was a sanctuary of polished mahogany and quiet power, towering bookcases lined with leather-bound volumes, their spines gilded with titles of law, history, and philosophy. A single desk lamp bathed the space in honeyed light, casting long shadows that danced across the oriental rug in shades of burgundy and gold. Elena closed the heavy door behind her and leaned against it for a moment, letting the cool would still her trembling shoulders. She could still hear the echo of Oliver's voice, his callous promise to Vivian, the syllables of her name dripping with triumph. In the soft glow of the lamp, Elena allowed her tears to fall, one silent droplet at a time. She pictured the dossier of documents she'd signed in blissful ignorance, every farmland title, every corporate share certificate, every gleaming car key. Each page had represented love. Now they felt like shackles binding her to a future she never truly chose. But as the tears subsided, a steely calm flooded her veins. Grief gave way to focus. She would not crumble beneath his betrayal. Instead, she would outmaneuver him at his own game. She had inherited more than wealth. She'd inherited Davenport resilience, the strength of generations who'd built an empire from grit and vision. In the hush of the study, that legacy whispered to her, urging her to rise. Elena settled at the desk, brushing a single strand of chestnut hair from her face. She opened her laptop, its sleek surface a stark contrast to the antique volumes surrounding it, and began to type. Each keystroke held purpose, a carefully crafted email to her mother. She outlined instructions in concise bullet points. Initiate immediate transfer of all property deeds back into the Davenport Family Trust. Redirect corporate share certificates to the trust's custodial account. Revoke any titles or registrations listing Oliver Grant as co-owner. Secure each luxury vehicle in the trust's name. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, drafting legal verbiage as precise as a surgeon's incision. She attached digital copies of the signed transfer documents for her mother's review. She knew her mother's attention to detail, how she prided herself on pre-processing Elena's decisions with surgical accuracy. And she trusted that her mother, proud matriarch of the Davenport line, would act swiftly to protect the family's legacy and her granddaughter's future. Elena paused, reviewing the email one last time. Her chest tightened with anticipation. With a resolute click, she hit send. The message whooshed into cyberspace, carrying with it the weight of her reborn resolve. Moments later, her phone chimed. Her mother's reply glowed on the screen. Done. You have until tomorrow to confirm. Elena's heart surged. In that single line, she felt the solidarity of her lineage. Her mother's swift action meant the Davenport assets were shielded from Oliver's grasp before he even realized what was happening. A fierce smile curved Elena's lips. She stood and paced, tracing the edges of the oriental rug as her mind raced ahead to the coming days. The unfolding of Oliver's assumed triumph, the shock when he discovered the transfers, and the ultimate unveiling of her strategy. She envisioned the courtroom drama, papers filed, allegations filed, public scandal rippling across social pages. But more than vengeance, she craved justice, the restoration of her autonomy, the safeguarding of Anna's inheritance, and the revelation that Elena Davenport was never useless. She was the architect of her own destiny. As midnight approached, Elena returned to the desk and drafted a brief note to the family's estate manager, instructing him to update all internal ledgers and alert the board of directors to the trust's restructuring. She used coded language, referencing only family governance matters, ensuring Oliver would have no immediate inkling. Then, with her tasks complete, she rose and walked to the study's tall windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. White roses glowed in the night, their fragrance drifting through slightly open panes. Elena inhaled deeply, letting the cool night air fill her lungs and steady her racing thoughts. Below, the mansion slumbered, unaware of the storm brewing within its walls. She pressed a hand to the glass and allowed herself a single moment of quiet triumph. The game was on, and Elena Davenport would not lose. She was heir not just to an empire, but to the cunning and courage that had built it, an heiress reborn in resolve, ready to claim her future on her own terms. For an entire week, Elena Davenport perfected her performance. Each morning, she swept down the grand marble staircase in a chiffon wrap dress, the pastel fabric swirling like mist around her ankles. At the breakfast table, she offered Oliver cinnamon brioche with a tinkling laugh. "Oh, Oliver, you spoil us," she cooed, brushing back a lock of hair as he kissed her cheek. In reality, her pulse hammered like a war drum beneath her silk blouse. Every soft syllable was a calculated note in her symphony of deceit. Out in public, she clutched his arm as if she'd discovered a rare treasure. At charity galas, she nodded enthusiastically when the host praised the couple. "Elena, you and Oliver are the perfect pair," she flashed her pulley smile, tucking her designer clutch under her elbow. Inside, Elena ticked down the hours until Vivian's next clandestine rendezvous, imagining every smug grin on Oliver's face when he bragged about taking over Davenport Enterprises. At the boardroom that Thursday, Elena arrived in a charcoal gray pencil skirt and crisp white blouse, her hair pulled back into a demure chignon. The directors greeted her with surprised delight. Normally modest about her involvement, today she leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Oliver," she purred as he entered, "wouldn't it look simply divine if the company bore your name alone?" Such a romantic gesture. Oliver's eyes shone with pride. The board exchanged approving glances. Elena suppressed a triumphant smile. Each word she spoke was a thread, weaving her web tighter around his overconfidence. By midday, she retreated to her private sitting room, where Anna played with her favorite wooden blocks. Elena sat on a velvet chaise, watching her daughter stack towers of pastel squares. She reached out, tousled Anna's curls, and whispered, "Mama loves you." In that moment, Elena's resolve solidified. Her daughter would grow up knowing her mother as the architect of her safety and not the foolish, useless wife Oliver so callously derided. Evenings became her stage. Over candlelit dinners, silver candelabra dripping wax onto linen tablecloths, Elena sipped Chardonnay as Oliver, unable to contain his triumph, fished for his phone from his jacket pocket. She watched him cradle it at his ear, voice low and conspiratorial. "Vivian, my love, very soon I'll be free," he crooned. "I've got the papers. Davenport Enterprises is all mine." Elena raised her glass in toast, murmuring, "To your brilliant future," her voice a silken veil. Oliver's grin gleamed in the lamplight. He leaned across the table to press a kiss on her hand, one of those gentle, doting kisses meant to reassure a naive spouse. Elena closed her eyes and savored the moment, letting him believe she'd never guessed a thing. She caught Anna's curious gaze from her high chair. The little girl's wide eyes blinked innocently. Elena tucked a stray curl behind Anna's ear and whispered, "Go fetch Daddy a napkin, sweetie." As Anna toddled off, Elena allowed herself a private nod of approval. Her daughter's future was no longer hanging by the thread of a deceitful husband's whim. Throughout the week, Elena sustained her delicate mask of unawareness. She laughed at Oliver's jokes, approved his grandiose plans for the company's rebranding, and even volunteered to host an upcoming charity luncheon to celebrate our joint successes. All the while, every document he thought he'd won, every asset he imagined under his sole name, was already transported safely beyond his grasp. As the sun set on the seventh day, Elena lingered in the grand foyer after everyone else had departed. She pressed her palm against the cool marble and closed her eyes. The echoes of her own footsteps sounded like applause. She had become the perfect, naive wife in Oliver's eyes, so convincing that a gentle hush settled over Lakeview Mansion as the first light of Sunday morning filtered through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the library. Outside, dewy roses unfurled their petals, and a pair of cardinals danced among the topiary. Inside, the library's honeyed oak shelves, laden with leather-bound classics and family histories, reflected the sun's glow, turning volumes into burnished gold. At the center stood a walnut writing desk, its surface cleared of all clutter, save for a single, cream-colored envelope sealed with scarlet wax. Elena Davenport held that envelope as one might cradle a fragile bird. Her slender fingers traced the Davenport crest embossed on its flap. Today she would make her most daring play yet. She'd rehearsed her lines so many times that the words had become part of her heartbeat. She straightened her shoulders, ever the picture of serene confidence in a tailored ivory-sheath dress, and summoned Oliver into the room. He appeared in the doorway moments later, still in his Sunday best suit, hair neatly combed back. His gray eyes widened at the scene, the sunlit library, Elena's composed posture, and that single envelope beckoning on the desk. "Elena?" he asked, voice tinged with curiosity and devotion. She smiled, the faintest curve of triumph touching her lips. "Oliver, please sit." She gestured toward the high-backed leather chair opposite her own. He crossed the marble floor in long strides, heart evidently thrumming in his chest. As he seated himself, Elena moved with deliberate calm to the desk and placed the envelope before him. "For 2 years," she began, voice gentle and unwavering, "you've shared in my dreams, my joys, and even in my sorrow." She paused, meeting his gaze. "But now, I want to share my greatest gift with you." She slid the envelope across the polished surface. "These are the official documents transferring Davenport Enterprises into your sole name." Oliver's breath caught in his throat. He reached forward with trembling hands, breaking the crimson seal. Elena watched, barely blinking, as he withdrew the crisp pages, the articles of incorporation, the notarized deed certificates, the Boer resolutions, each one a testament to her calculated sacrifice. He looked up, eyes shining as though he might burst with gratitude. "Elena?" "I don't," his voice cracked. He rose, crossing the remaining distance in 2 strides to sweep her into an embrace. His arms enveloped her so fiercely that she felt the gentle snap of her spine. "You're unbelievable," he choked out, pressing his cheek to hers. "I don't deserve you." Elena closed her eyes at the warmth of his words, letting the moment stretch. In his grip, she let him believe she'd relinquished everything out of boundless love. She felt the soft rustle of his tailor-made jacket and the faint scent of his cologne, cedarwood and bergamot, drift across her senses. Above them, the afternoon light sparkled through the glass ceiling, as though the universe itself approved her final maneuver. Pulling back, Oliver cupped her face in his hands and kissed her temple. "I trust you," he whispered, echoing her own words. "You're the most amazing woman." Elena's heart fluttered, the lie so convincing. Even he believed it. As he stepped away, she watched him carry the documents to the window's ledge, arranging them neatly, as though they were trophies. He traced the corporate seal with a reverent fingertip, eyes alight with intoxicating hope. Elena turned, walking slowly around the desk to peer out at the manicured gardens. Sunlight dappled the gravel paths, and Anna's laughter drifted from some distant corner of the estate, an innocent counterpoint to the web of deceit she had spun. In that tranquil moment, Elena allowed herself a private exhalation. The test was complete. Not only had she executed the final transfer Oliver believed would secure his future, but she had done so in a way that left him gloriously unaware of the trap closing around him. Turning back to him, she laid a hand on his shoulder. I wanted to prove how much I believe in us, she said softly. Because yours is a name worth carrying forward. Her words struck him like a benediction. He beamed, awash in joy and relief. As they stood together, husband and wife, triumphant in their love, Elena's smile deepened with satisfaction. The cornerstone of her strategy had been placed, and soon the rest would follow. But for now, she allowed the golden glow of that Sunday morning to warm her, knowing that the gift of trust was a masterpiece of her own design. The late afternoon sun slanted through the library's glass walls, setting motes of dust dancing like embers in the golden light. Elena stood by the tall windows, one hand lightly resting on Anna's shoulder as her daughter busied herself counting the spines of the leather-bound books. The hush of the library was soothing, until she saw Oliver's figure slip away down the marble hall, his posture urgent, his stride all but invisible to any but the most watchful eye. He's going out, Elena murmured, voice barely above a breath. Anna looked up with bright curiosity. Elena offered a serene smile, disguising her racing heart. Why don't you fetch your doll, darling, and I'll tell you a story when we're outside. Anna's giggle trailed off as she toddled ahead, clutching her porcelain doll's hand. Elena followed, smoothing the folds of her skirt, every step measured and calm. She led Anna down the corridor and through French doors that opened onto the courtyard, a sanctuary of clipped hedges, marble fountains, and rose bushes heavy with blooms. The air smelled of earth and petals, a deceptive sweetness that belied the deception unfolding moments away. Oliver crossed the courtyard in long, confident strides, phone pressed to his ear. From a distance, Elena glimpsed his profile. Jaw clenched, eyebrows raised in excitement, lips moving in the reckless promises she had overheard once before. She let Anna's small hand tangle in hers as they strolled toward the rose arbor, its arched wrought iron frame dripping with ivory blossoms. Beneath its canopy, the world seemed hushed, an echo chamber for the words she hungered to hear. She crouched behind a cluster of lavender, Anna crouching beside her, captivated by a ladybug on her doll's dress. Through the lattice of branches, Elena watched Oliver and listened. It's done, he said, voice rich with triumph. The company is now mine. She'll never suspect a thing. Elena stifled a sharp intake of breath. Through the dappled sunlight, she saw his fingers stroke the papers tucked in his briefcase, the very documents she'd gifted him that morning. Soon I'll divorce her, he continued, tone dripping with cruel certainty, and be with you forever, Vivian. A soft, victorious laugh floated back from the phone, smooth as polished marble. Elena felt the world tilt. Beneath her, the earth seemed to tremble. Yet she remained utterly still, her face a mask of gentle indulgence as she bent to comfort Anna. The little girl pointed at a rose petal caught on her doll's bonnet, unknowing of the storm around them. Through the next flurry of words, Elena pieced together every detail of Oliver's treachery, the timeline for the divorce filing, the secret account where Vivian's engagement ring was being sent, even the whispered reassurance that Anna would be provided for, an empty promise from a man who had never valued anything he could not use. As the call ended with a muted click, Oliver slipped the phone into his jacket pocket and straightened, his face alight with unguarded triumph. He turned toward the house, scanning the garden as though expecting to be congratulated. Elena rose beside Anna, smoothing the child's dress. She caught his eye. For a heartbeat, Oliver's gaze softened with love before he saw the steel glint in Elena's own. He blinked, unsettled. Elena? Everything all right? He asked, stepping closer. Elena allowed herself a warm smile. She ruffled Anna's hair and lifted her into her arms. Anna found a ladybug, she said in a light tone. Come look. Anna pointed at the tiny insect crawling up her doll's skirt, eyes shining. Oliver leaned in, fascinated, and in that moment of innocent wonder, Elena saw the final piece fall into place. She had heard his plan. She knew the timeline. The final act of her strategy was about to begin. As Oliver crouched beside them, Elena pressed her lips together to suppress her exhilaration. The enemy had revealed himself, bearing his ambition and arrogance beneath the very roses he had helped plant. And now, as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Elena held her daughter close, ready to move the pieces on the board, and to strike in a way Oliver would never see coming. Elena's fingertips drifted over the polished oak of the drawing-room piano keys as the courier's knock echoed through the high-ceilinged space. 9 days of silent anticipation narrowed her breath to a steady whisper. When Oliver burst in, divorce papers clenched triumphantly in one fist, the other outstretched to Vivian. His victory seemed to echo off the friezes of ancestral portraits. She signed them. "I'm free," he bellowed, voice cracking like a starting pistol. Vivian's face lit with the kind of delight reserved for spoiled debutantes. Her suitcase stood sentinel in the corner, silk gowns still crisp in their wrappers, ready for a honeymoon that would never be hers. She glided forward, eyes sparkling, and wrapped her arms around Oliver's neck. But Elena, seated with Anna nestled on her lap, offered only a tilted smile. The baby cooed, oblivious, her tiny hand reaching for the ivory keys, sending a single note ringing through the room. Elena's gaze never wavered. "I see," she said, voice soft yet steely, as though she were congratulating a child on a harmless victory. "Congratulations." She shifted Anna to one hip, rocking her gently, as if the moment were nothing more than another lullaby. Oliver, drunk on his own triumph, pulled Elena out of her chair in a sloppy embrace. He kissed her cheek, an act meant to show ownership, and Vivian clapped her hands in glee, mistaking Elena's composure for shock. But beneath that serene mask, Elena tasted something richer than vengeance, the cool, clear promise of the future. As Vivian and Oliver twirled toward the grand staircase, he humming a victorious tune, Elena uncrossed her legs. She placed Anna down with a whisper of reassurance and stood. The late afternoon sunlight caught the faintest sheen of triumph in her eyes. She moved with deliberate grace, heading toward the French doors that led to the private terrace. There, she paused, inhaling the scent of jasmine drifting on the breeze. 9 days of meticulous planning had led to this quiet moment. She had signed the papers, yes, but only after ensuring every clause, every escrowed asset, leaned irrevocably in her favor. The house would remain hers. Anna's trust would remain sealed. Oliver's freedom was nothing more than a gilded cage he eagerly stepped into. Behind her, Vivian's laughter chimed through the glass. Elena allowed herself a single, soft exhale. The papers fluttered in the drawing room like fallen petals, beautiful, but powerless without the roots she had already severed. Tomorrow, the world would awaken to the truth of her design. Tonight, though, she simply closed the doors, cradled her daughter, and let the last notes of her triumph settle into the quiet. Elena's fingertips brushed the edge of the mahogany desk as sunlight streamed through the tall French windows, casting lattice-shaped shadows across the perspex-wrapped divorce papers. Oliver, still riding the crest of his imagined triumph, leaned forward, anticipation glittering in his eyes. With a soft, deliberate motion, Elena raised her left wrist, her wedding cuff pushed back just enough to reveal a single, crisp sheet of parchment. "This," she said, voice low and crystalline, "is the new Davenport Trust Agreement." She held the document aloft, the gold-embossed crest at its header catching the light like a warning beacon. "Notarized at dawn the morning after our vows." Her words fell into the hush of the drawing room like shards of glass. Oliver's triumphant grin faltered, his hand slipping from the papers on the desk. "What?" he began, throat tight. Vivian, dressed in her pastel silk, stepped forward, face a mask of hopeful curiosity, only to gasp as Elena continued. "My mother is the sole beneficiary," Elena intoned, her tone absolute, "until I choose to reinvest my inheritance. All your spoils are secured in a blind trust." Control reverted to her the moment you attempted betrayal. A bead of sweat traced a path down Oliver's temple. His lips parted, but no words came. Vivian clutched at her throat, her suitcase dropped beside her, scarves and ribbons tumbling like wounded birds. "You transferred everything back to your mother?" Oliver finally stammered, voice raw with disbelief. Elena rose with the calm of a queen at dawn. Slipping Anna from her lap to her other hip, she settled the child's tiny hand against the satin of her gown. "You've lost Davenport Enterprises, my heart, and now this family," she declared, each syllable measured and sure. Under her words, the grand portraits lining the walls seemed to lean in, bearing witness to the moment when a dynasty shifted. Vivian's high-pitched cry echoed as she spun on her heel and fled through the hallway, her heels clicking like a panicked metronome. Oliver sank to the edge of the desk, the blind trust document slipping from his grasp and fluttering to the parquet floor. His chest heaved with silent sobs of regret, no more fortune to flaunt, no dignity to salvage. Elena paused by the window, Anna's head resting against her shoulder. Beyond the glass, the rose garden bloomed innocently, unaware of the upheaval within. With a final, steadying breath, she turned away from the wreckage of her past and toward the path she would forge, a life rebuilt on justice, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter. In that quiet triumph, the true inheritance revealed itself: freedom.